There's a dangerous illusion holding your generation hostage, and it's time someone finally broke the silence. You were taught to believe that everything would turn out fine if you simply followed the rules. Study hard, get a job, work diligently, and one day, after years of sacrifice, you'd enjoy a well-earned retirement. But here's the truth no one warned you about. The system changed without your permission, and it changed quietly. Today's collapse doesn't announce itself with sirens or newspaper headlines. It wears disguises: inflation, unemployment, stagnant wages, and broken promises. One day you wake up and realize the ground beneath your feet has already cracked, and no one sent you a warning. Warren Buffett saw this before. He lived through crises that shattered economies, but the most painful thing he ever witnessed wasn't the numbers. It was a blindness. Because while some lose everything, others rise, and not because they're lucky, but because they're prepared. Buffett often says that financial disasters don't scream, they whisper, and the only ones who hear are those who've stopped trusting old formulas. If you're watching this, chances are you've already sensed something is off. You can't explain it yet, but you know the rules are broken. That's exactly why this channel exists, for people like you who are ready to stop surviving and start understanding. So if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell, because over the next few videos, you'll learn what almost nobody is telling you about this economic shift, and it may finally allow you to position yourself as a player, not just a spectator. Let's begin with something few people talk about: tariffs. Most think of them as patriotic economic shields, but Buffett calls them what they really are: disguised taxes. You're not punishing foreign companies. You're punishing yourself at the checkout counter. Prices go up. Salaries stay flat. Your shopping cart shrinks, yet politicians tell you it's for your own good. There's no magic in this. You pay more, get less, and the difference doesn't come from a fairy tale. As Buffett once joked, the tooth fairy isn't covering the gap. Take, for example, the U.S. tariffs on steel and aluminum. The goal? Protect domestic production. The result? Higher prices for cars, appliances, and housing materials, without any sustainable job creation. It was a collapse disguised as patriotism. And it hit hardest where people had the least margin to breathe. This is the new face of crisis. It doesn't crash your front door. It seeps into your electricity bill, your groceries, your home repairs. It's silent but ruthless. And economic pain doesn't just hit your bank account. It scars your mindset. Warren Buffett has spoken repeatedly about how the 1929 collapse turned into a multi-generational trauma. His own father, once a confident stockbroker, was financially and emotionally destroyed. That fear was passed down, not just as stories, but as hesitation, caution, and mistrust in the system. Think about it. How many of your financial decisions have been driven more by fear than by strategy? This is the psychology of scarcity. Even when opportunities are real and visible, the echo of past pain can make you run from the market, stash cash on a mattress, and miss decades of growth. Buffett insists, courage is essential in a crisis, but it must be informed courage. That means understanding the market, studying cycles, and making intelligent decisions even in chaos. Instead of fleeing stocks during downturns, Buffett always recommends researching solid businesses with strong fundamentals and cash reserves. Companies like Coca-Cola, Apple, and Johnson & Johnson, brands that endure even when the waves get violent. But most importantly, you must learn to recognize when your reaction is based on inherited fear rather than informed analysis. Because the economic trauma isn't always obvious. You can carry it without realizing it. That's why changing your mindset is just as essential as increasing your income. A mental shift is the first step toward building real financial power. Let's go back to the 1930s. Imagine waking up and finding out that your bank account is empty, your life savings gone overnight. That was reality for thousands of families. Over 4,000 U.S. banks collapsed, and with them, trust disappeared. People stopped saving. They stopped investing. Fear spread like wildfire. The collapse of faith in the financial system was invisible, but it was more corrosive than anything you could measure. That's why Warren Buffett believes the FDIC wasn't just a technical measure. It was a psychological foundation. By guaranteeing deposits up to $250,000, It gave everyday people the confidence to engage with the system again. It allowed the small investor to feel like they had a fighting chance. And confidence, Buffett says, is the fuel of the markets. Without it, everything stops. Now imagine how different things could have been during the Great Depression if that safety net had existed. Maybe the trauma would have been lighter. Maybe the recovery would have been quicker. Maybe young Warren wouldn't have grown up listening to stories of ruin. But ironically, it was that very experience that helped him understand the true value of trust, not just as a feeling, but as a financial engine. Between 1929 and 1951, the U.S. stock market remained mostly stagnant. Decades of frustration made many investors give up entirely. Dreams were buried. But Buffett didn't buy into despair. As a teenager, he saw that the key wasn't timing the market perfectly. It was believing in the recovery. His first stock purchase came at age 11. His first lesson? The market punishes impatience but rewards long-term vision. Investing in excellent companies is like planting trees. You don't get shade on day one. You water, you wait, and one day, the branches protect you. Even during economic downturns, strong companies like Procter & Gamble and American Express stood tall. Buffett often says the U.S. economy is like a compressed spring. The more pressure it absorbs, the more power it builds for the rebound. And history proves him right. After every crash, the market didn't just return, it soared. The lesson? If you believe in the system, you invest when others are running, because that's when the best opportunities appear. Most people panic at the bottom. Buffett sees the bottom as a launch pad. That habit shaped his fortune, and it can shape yours too. Sometimes the greatest strength is to keep believing when no one else does. Now, let me ask you this. What's one financial lesson you've learned the hard way? Share it in the comments. You never know who might benefit from your story. And if you found this part helpful, hit the like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Most people hear the words trade deficit and immediately think of it as something purely negative, an abstract, technical issue best left to economists. But Warren Buffett has always been clear. Trade deficits aren't just numbers. They're consequences. They shape lives, communities, and entire generations. The global economy may lower the cost of goods for consumers, but often does so at a silent cost, one that's measured not in dollars, but in jobs lost and futures altered. Think of it like this. You walk into a store and smile because your new TV costs half as much as it did 10 years ago. But that lower price came at a price of its own. The factory worker who used to build that television in your town is now unemployed. And that is the invisible cost of efficiency. Buffett has always warned that these shifts are not accidental. They're the result of deliberate policy decisions, strategic moves with political and social consequences. Globalization is a double-edged sword. It lifts the living standards of consumers, but often undermines the financial stability of producers, especially in local industries. Entire towns, once thriving with industry and pride, have been left hollow not by chance, but by trade deals that made sense on paper but ignored the human impact. The North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA, is a prime example. It lowered manufacturing costs for U.S. companies, boosted shareholder profits, and made imported goods more affordable. But behind those benefits was a darker reality. Entire industrial zones in the U.S. were devastated. Schools shut down, property values plummeted, and families were fractured as the young left in search of opportunity elsewhere. For every shareholder who gained, there were workers who lost everything. And this is Buffett's point. If governments fail to explain the true cost of economic policy, they're not leading, they're hiding. When leadership ignores the human side of the equation, the result is resentment, polarization, and a crisis of trust. The consequences of silence are always louder later. Buffett believes in globalization, but not blind globalization. He believes in innovation, but not at the cost of human dignity. And most of all, he believes in honest leadership, the kind that tells the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. Real leaders don't use empty slogans. They explain, they educate, and they protect. Because at the end of the day, economic collapse is not just about statistics. It has a name, a face, and a story. It's the man who spent 30 years on a factory floor, only to be replaced by a robot or by a labor contract in a different continent. What happens to him? What does he do next? Buffett says that's where the system has a duty. It's not enough to say retrain. It's not enough to expect a 58-year-old worker to suddenly become a software engineer overnight. Instead of discarding these professionals, we need to reintegrate them into new value chains. Public programs can hire former factory workers for infrastructure maintenance, renewable energy projects, logistics services, roles that restore dignity and purpose. These are not handouts. They're investments in social stability. They prevent isolation from turning into revolt. Let's face it, it's cheaper to reintegrate people into the economy than to deal with the consequences of exclusion. Buffett has often said the economy should be a ladder, not a wall. But when the rungs vanish, so does mobility, and with it comes frustration, extremism, and deep distrust in institutions. True wealth, he says, isn't just measured in market gains. It's measured in how many people can cross a storm without falling into an abyss. If leaders forget this, the cost is always political. Populism rises. Trust disappears. And no GDP growth can compensate for the collapse of cohesion. Warren Buffett has lived through world wars, pandemics, inflationary spirals, bursting bubbles, and presidents being removed from office. And still, he says the same thing with unwavering conviction. Never bet against America. That's not empty patriotism. It's a strategic observation. The American economy has a rare gift. It adapts in chaos. Every collapse made the system smarter, more agile. It's not that the path has ever been easy. America's story is filled with recessions, strikes, civil conflict, and broken dreams. But there's something in its core, something in its DNA, that enables rapid reinvention. Buffett compares American capitalism to a high-powered engine. Sometimes it chokes. Sometimes it sputters. But once it kicks in, nothing can hold it back. Those who understand this don't retreat when the system wobbles. They lean in. They double down when others run. The strength of the American economy comes from its institutions, its market freedoms, but above all, from its relentless culture of innovation. Startups rise from the rubble. New industries bloom when old ones crumble. That's what happened in the 2000s with the internet. That's what happened after 2008 with fintech. And it's happening again now with renewable energy and AI. Those who observed the patterns profited. Those who panicked lost the moment. But Buffett warns, growth without protection is quicksand. If the top of the pyramid grows while the base crumbles, the system eventually collapses under its own weight. That's why he supports policies that encourage innovation, but also defend the vulnerable. He knows no economy can thrive for long if its rewards go to the few while its risks are carried by the many. The final lesson is powerful. Betting on the future takes more than courage. It takes clarity. It takes informed action. Resilience isn't about denying the problem. It's about confronting it with strategy. While others scream that the sky is falling, Buffett smiles and buys more because he knows that what looks like a storm to many is fertilizer to the prepared. Let me ask you something. What's one thing you wish your government or leaders had explained better about today's economy? Drop it in the comments. I want to hear your take. And don't forget, if this video gave you a new perspective, share it with someone who needs to hear this message. There's something deeply unsettling about seeing your bank account drained overnight. Imagine waking up and realizing that the money you saved for years, gone. That wasn't fiction in the 1930s. It was the brutal reality for thousands of families. Warren Buffett often recounts how the Great Depression shaped not just the economy, but the collective mindset of an entire generation. His own father, a stockbroker, was emotionally broken by the financial crash of 1929. That trauma didn't just end with him. It was passed down like an invisible heirloom. Fear of risk, mistrust of opportunity, and a belief that safety lies only in preservation. This is a hidden cause of collapse, not just economic, but psychological. Scarcity rewires the brain. People stop seeing growth as a possibility and start viewing every choice as a threat. Even with opportunities on the table, the reflex is to retreat. Save everything. Avoid everything. Trust no one. Buffett calls this the silent inheritance of fear, and it can cost more than any recession. That's why he stresses the importance of not just growing your income, but transforming your mindset. Fear is a terrible financial advisor. And it's especially destructive when it disguises itself as prudence. If you're avoiding all risks, you're also avoiding all rewards. Courage, Buffett says, is essential, but not blind courage, not gambling. It's about informed boldness, knowing the market, understanding cycles, recognizing that even in chaos, strong fundamentals don't lie. Companies like Coca-Cola, Apple, and Johnson & Johnson weren't just lucky survivors. They were resilient because they were built to last. He didn't run from the market in hard times. He leaned in. He looked for strength under pressure. That's why, even in the face of downturns, he bought. Because Buffett knows wealth is built when others flee. Not when everything is safe, but when everything seems lost. This mindset shift is crucial. Think about it. How many of your financial choices were driven more by fear than by vision? How many times have you said, maybe later, to something you knew could grow your future? Buffett's first investment came at age 11. It didn't make him rich overnight, but it taught him a truth that most people never learn. The market punishes impatience and rewards vision. Strong companies with durable models are like trees. You plant them, you water them, and someday they give you shade when the sun is brutal. Between 1929 and 1951, the U.S. stock market was flat, 2 decades that crushed the spirits of millions. But Buffett didn't get swept away by that pessimism. He believed that long-term resilience would win, and history proved him right. Every major crash since has led not just to recovery, but to new highs. He often says, the American economy is like a coiled spring. The more it's pressed, the more power it builds. This isn't optimism. It's historical data. Recessions don't last forever, but they do filter out those who weren't ready. And readiness comes not from luck, but from information. Let's talk about one of the most overlooked protections that changed everything: FDIC insurance. During the Great Depression, over 4,000 banks failed. People lost life savings overnight, not because they made bad decisions, but because there was no system to protect them. Trust in the banks collapsed. People stopped saving, investing, dreaming. It took years to rebuild that trust. And FDIC played a massive role. Today, it quietly guarantees up to $250,000 per account. It's not glamorous, but it's foundational. It's what allows everyday people to feel safe putting money in a bank again. And that safety is what fuels investment, growth, confidence. That's what Buffett means when he talks about psychological infrastructure. Stability isn't just about laws. It's about trust. And that trust needs to be protected, especially in times like these. Because here's what most people miss. Economic collapse rarely announces itself. It doesn't show up like a storm on the horizon. It creeps in. It infiltrates your grocery bill, your electricity, your rent. It doesn't destroy cities in an instant. It erodes them, one unpaid invoice at a time. So ask yourself, are you positioned to adapt? Are your investments diversified? Is your mindset built for resilience or retreat? Buffett insists that if we want to prevent future collapses from becoming personal disasters, we need more than government policies. We need economic literacy. We need to understand how systems work and how we fit into them. He often compares this to driving a car. You don't need to be a mechanic, but you should know how to steer, how to brake, how to navigate. Otherwise, someone else is driving your life for you. That's what this video and this channel is about. Not fear, not panic, but clarity, so you could be the one at the wheel. And before we wrap, here's something to consider. Studies show that the majority of viewers on channels like this one aren't actually subscribed. If you found value here, take a second now to check if you're subscribed and hit the bell icon so you don't miss the next video. We're building something important, and I want you with us. What did today's message spark in you? Was it a memory? A realization? A question? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'll be reading every one of them. And if you know someone who needs this insight, share it with them. Because the best time to prepare is before the storm.